Good morning, everyone. In today's Gospel from John, Jesus preaches about something that is happening today right before our eyes. We are experiencing this at the moment as this Gospel is being proclaimed to us in 2020. Jesus said to his disciples, "If the world hates you, realize that it hated me first. If you belonged to the world would love its own. But because you do not belong to the world, and I have chosen you out of the world hates you. Remember the word I spoke to you. No slave is greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they kept my word, they will also keep yours. And they will do all these things to you on account of my name, because they do not know the one who sent me." The Gospel of the Lord. "And they will do all these things to you on account of my name, because they do not know the one who sent me." My dear friends, it is almost 2,000 years now since Jesus first proclaimed this gospel to his disciples, to those that were gathered around and listening to him as he preached the good news. And just shortly after his death and resurrection, the apostles began facing persecution, first in the hands of Saul, who eventually became Paul following his conversion. And that persecution has continued to this day in so many different forms. Throughout history, we have seen and read the martyrdom of different Christians, and to this day we continue to hear about Christians being killed in different places of the world as a result of their faith. These are obvious ways in which Christians are being persecuted today on account of Jesus' name. And that continues in so many different forms. Even within the current pandemic that we're experiencing, we continue to live a persecution because of the name of Jesus, because of the one we worship, because of the creator of the universe, because of the redeemer of humankind. Now you see, following the pandemic, a lot of businesses and different institutions and buildings and places were locked down. But when we go to certain areas, we realize that the lockdown is different from what we experience in others. For instance, here in our archdiocese, we were locked down from the celebration of Mass, but yet there was a possibility of us to still have the church doors open so that people could come in and worship Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. But in other places, it wasn't the case, and obviously we understand that in certain places, the rate of infection, that the people experience in those cities, like for instance in New York City, it doesn't permit the opening of buildings at all, even for worship. But in such scenarios, we absolutely understand. But at the same time, we recognize that in certain places, there's a recognition of the need to worship God, like the possibility of opening churches for adoration. But now that things are beginning to open up slowly in different parts of the country, and perhaps in different parts of the world, the reaction is different. The businesses and the different institutions that are allowed to open tend to have a bias towards the church in certain places. And I say this because just this morning, one of my brothers was sharing to me, he spoke to his sister in Hawaii. And it is shocking. It is shocking to hear that in Hawaii, certain restaurants are allowed to be open for dine-ins, yet churches are still required to remain locked down. And now I just think that this is outrageous in the sense that the interactions between people in restaurants that are open for dine-in cannot be any different than the interaction that will be happening in churches. As a matter of fact, I think the same parameters that will be put into place in these restaurants could be observed in our churches so that we can continue to come together as a community and worship the Lord. But unfortunately, this is the reality that we're living, that this bias is being done towards Christians. And this, my dear friends, is another way of persecution. It's another form of persecution. Persecution is not just through martyrdom, but it can also be through a deprivation of the possibility to worship our Creator, to worship our Redeemer. So, my dear brothers and sisters, Christ reminds us in this gospel that, you see, because of me, you are going to be persecuted. And at the same time, because of me, you will be welcomed. Christ himself was persecuted. He suffered and he was killed. He was killed unjustly. He was killed unjustly. And because we are his followers, because we believe in him, we believe in his saving grace, we are going to face persecution. And he wants us to be aware of this message, that when the persecution comes, that when the trials and tribulations come our way, we should always remember that he who is our master and redeemer went through trials and persecution and suffering, and that we can embrace all the sufferings, all the trials, all the persecution that come our way. And just as he carried his cross on the way to Calvary, we can be able to accept the suffering that comes our way and just commit it all into his hands, because we know that with him we can find our comfort and we can find our consolation. Because we live in the world, but we are not of the world. And the world will always want to persecute us because we do not belong. Have a great day and God bless you.